we got a really good author that's going to join us here and speak a few words. But if you hadn't had a chance to see his book, 7 Seconds to Die, this is an amazing book. I encourage you to get the book and read it. A little bit about our speaker, Colonel John Antal. He's an award-winning author of 16 books and hundreds of articles about leadership, history, and war. His recent books, again, are 7 Seconds to Die and Leadership Rising. He served 30 years in the U.S. Army. Thank you, sir, for your service. And he's a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. It's my pleasure to bring up to the stage Colonel John Antal, retired. Thank you.
Leadership matters. We have a challenge. We're running out of time. We need your leadership. Your leadership is going to be decisive in the coming storm. I want to talk about the next war. Not just a war that we'll talk about that's far away, 20 to 30 years from now, but a war that could be happening today or tomorrow.
When the truth is found to be life, and know the joy within you dies, don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? Wouldn't you love somebody to love? You better find somebody to love. Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? Wouldn't you love somebody to love? You better find somebody to love.
War is changing. We need deterrence now, not in 2030. We will need it in 2030 as well, but we need it now. Now, there are a lot of people that are saying that the war is coming. Putin, of course, believes that he's at war with NATO and the U.S., and it is a hybrid war, so we are at war with Russia. The Chief of Staff of the Army says China will probably attack us. The Chinese say that unless we listen to them, that they're going to attack us. We should take them at their word. The Chief of Staff of the British Army said this last summer. This is our 1937 moment. All of you know World War II started in September 1939. He says, we're not at war at this moment, but we must act rapidly. And England, in fact, the United Kingdom, is at war with Russia right now, even though it's a hybrid war. The Admiral Charles Richard from the U.S. Strategic Command last fall said this Ukraine crisis, it's just a warm-up. Says the big one is coming. Now, he retired shortly after he made that comment. You need to study 3 wars that all of you, everyone in this room, needs to understand and know about. These are the 3 wars, the most important wars that have happened in the last 3 years. Very few people know these wars and have studied these wars. Our military leadership and our defense leadership needs to understand these wars. The first is the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War. That was a peer fight between Azerbaijan and Armenia in 2020. They had roughly the same amount of forces, only the Armenians had the high ground, had deep and well-positioned defensive positions, and the Azerbaijanis attacked them, used a lot of loitering munitions and unmanned aerial systems, so that it became the first war primarily won by robotic systems. The Azerbaijanis won in 44 days, decisive victory, multi-domain joint campaign. We should study this war. The next is the Israeli-Hamas war of 2021. In 11 days, leveraging all their unmanned systems, including a sky full of unmanned aerial systems and, of course, satellite coverage and everything you can think of, the Israelis brought Hamas to their knees in 11 days. Hamas was shooting 400, 500, 600 rockets a day into Israel. And this was the first war in history primarily won by artificial intelligence. How about that? You should know that. The third war is the ongoing Russia-Ukrainian war. This is the largest war in Europe since World War II. It is a war that shows more innovation and more changing methods of warfare lessons than any other war you could imagine. We need to be studying this war. We need to have case studies on all the important battles, and we need to understand why things are unfolding the way they are. Now, the second Nagorno-Karabakh war that I mentioned, this one should have been a true awakening moment for us so that we understood the power of top attack and the power of unmanned aerial systems. This is combat footage from the war. Imagine if these were American soldiers. Armenian soldiers being devastated by Azerbaijani loitering munitions and unmanned combat aerial vehicles. This is also combat footage from an Azerbaijani Spike LR anti-tank guided missile. More and more systems now have cameras in them and can be adjusted on the fly. They give you three things. First, you get to see the battle space. They act as ISR collectors. Two, you know if you hit the target. You'll get a good BDA, bomb damage assessment. And three, you can use this footage for information warfare ammunition. You use this footage and you put it on social media. And Armenia was watching, mothers and fathers in Armenia were watching these videos every night, trying to see if their sons had been killed in the fight. Imagine how demoralizing that was. Now that was an Azerbaijani gunner with his command and control screen for that Spike LR. One Armenian soldier said this: there was nowhere to hide, and there was no way to fight back. Nowhere to hide, no way to fight back. I can't think of anything more demoralizing than being able to be totally impotent on the battle space and just be a target. The Israeli-Hamas war. What Israel did was amazing. Hamas had dug a system of tunnels called the Metro. They had used millions of dollars to create deep underground infiltration tunnels. The Israelis knew where some of them were, but not all of them. Using their artificial intelligence to collect all the ISR information they had from all sources, multi-domain sources, they were able to follow Hamas leaders down into the tunnels, find where they were, because of their telephone and cell phone communications, and then target them when they coalesced inside the metro. After 11 days, Hamas sued for peace. First war in history primarily won by artificial intelligence. We need to study this war. And then, of course, the Russian-Ukrainian war, the ongoing fight. And what are we learning there? Tanks don't matter at all unless you don't want to win. Tanks matter. Armored vehicles matter, but they can be destroyed if they're not employed differently. We need to have a new approach to combined arms. The Battle of Volodar is one of the fights that we ought to have as a case study as well. Now, there's others that we should study that are happening right now. But you can't get through the Ukrainian terrain on wheels. The Rasputitsa, the mud, is so thick that only tracked vehicles, and even then tracked vehicles, can get stuck. The road network is so poor that you have to travel off the roads, and everything else is mined. You can see here the Russians trying to escape the artillery fire, running into minefields. And 3 guys are dead. Now, we like to think that the Russians have so many problems that we would never have. We need to be careful. This is a tough fight. This is a big theater. The distances are vast. The amount of artillery fire that is used and the amount of mines that are placed, incredible. And what the Russians do is they wait for you to mass your forces into a fire sack, and then they annihilate you with artillery fires. Of course, command posts are a huge problem as well. The Russians have taken tremendous losses in their command posts. Their command posts are not much different than our command posts at the beginning of the war. We have got to change how we do command and control. We need to be able to do distributed mission command in a mesh command post arrangement. And we need to define those terms and figure out how to do it. Now, here are 7 observations from these recent wars. The first is that you must think to win. We should be thinking through these 3 wars and figuring out what we need to do next, not waiting for the war to happen, getting hit in the face with a sledgehammer, and then trying to wake up and recover. Train as you fight. We must train under the conditions we will fight. So, for the soldiers out there, raise your hand if you've dug a foxhole in the last year. Right. If we do not learn how to dig in fast, we'd better be under armor because the artillery is going to take us down. How many soldiers here have operated a drone in the last year? Raise your hand. Right. We have a huge problem. We must train as we fight. We should have drones above our training all the time, taking video and using it for after-action reviews. You can buy them on the GSA catalog. You can get American-made small UAS, unmanned aerial systems, through the GSA catalog. We should be flying those above our formations all the time to see how we look from the top. You saw the videos of the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War. Top attack is the preferred method of warfare. We must know what we look like from the top. The target that sticks out gets hammered. You heard about this earlier today when the guys from the NTC talked. The target that sticks out gets hammered. If you have more than 4 vehicles together anywhere in the battle space, you're a target that will be found and killed. And that's the lesson from the Ukrainian war. 4 vehicles. 4 vehicles looks like a platoon, and there'll be a lot of platoons out there on the battle space. But 10 vehicles, Haha, 12, 20, that's a target. That's target that sticks out. How will our division headquarters operate? What about a Corps headquarters? I was a Corps G3 once, Land Before Time. Think about the Corps headquarters and how it's equipped with expando vans. Those won't work. They are relocatable. They are not mobile. We need to dig in to survive. We need to attack to win. We have to learn how to dig in. We have to learn how to dig in fast. We have to dig foxholes and trenches. The Ukrainians are able to harden their positions rapidly when they get stuck and can't go forward any farther by digging in. And when they do dig in, they then control that ground fiercely. But they have to dig in deep and they have to dig in bunkers because top attack will take you down. You saw what happened to the Armenians in the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War in that clip I showed you. We need to attack to win, which means we've got to have armored, protected systems that can move across the deadly space. And we've got to figure out a way to get through obstacle belts and minefields. So, how would you get through the Russian minefields? Explosive breach is the most important way. Why not roboticize hundreds of 113s or smaller robots with a lot of explosives in them and blow your way through those lines? Mikliks, those are very exotic pieces of equipment that only work most of the time. Every time I fired a Miklik in Korea, 1 out of maybe 3 would work. The other 2 we'd have to detonate with 50 caliber machine gun fire. Now, my Mikliks were probably older than the ones they have now, but there's a lot of things we can do with explosive breach and robotics. Modern war is a shot to the head, not a shot to the body. Headquarters will be taken out, as I've already talked about. We've got to think through a new distributed mission command, mesh CP command post arrangement so that we are distributed and dispersed and still can talk without staff co-location. And we need the doctrine writers to think through all the definitions and give those to industry so industry can understand what we're talking about. Fighters and logisticians must think and train alike. This is a huge problem. Our logistics folks are not ready for combat. Now that may sound like a harsh statement, but I just returned from the NTC not too long ago, and I watched what happened there, and it was a target waiting to happen. Vehicles lined up like on a motor pool, fuel vehicles, ammunition vehicles, and they thought they were out of range. There are no sanctuaries. No place in the battle space is out of range now. Every place can be hit. We need our fighters and our logisticians to think hard about the next fight and adapt. We need to disperse, and we need a mesh logistics system. And then we need to fight combined arms differently. We've trained the Ukrainians how to fight combined arms, and they're doing it in the old way, the way we trained them, and they're dying in the old way. Our challenge is that we should put robotics forward first, and we have systems right now that we could do this with. We don't need to wait for Terminator robots. We can do a lot of things now. We need to use different thinking. Now, these are the top warfighting disruptors that I think you should take a picture of and you should understand, because these impact everything that's happening in warfare. And this comes from my in-depth study of these 3 wars, plus a deep study of military history for many years. The first is the transparent battle space. The battle space is transparent. There is no place that cannot be seen. In the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, the Azerbaijanis were able to see the Armenians with small UAS, with medium UAS, with high altitude UAS, with satellites. They had their own two Azur Sky satellites zeroing in on Nagorno-Karabakh. They had all the Turkish satellites that the Turks would let them have access to. They had an AWACS that was flying loopholes or circles in Turkish airspace that couldn't be shot down, that was giving them target information. That battle space was so registered, the Armenians didn't stand a chance. Now, Turkey supported Armenia in that war, and they did that all the way, except for applying actual fighting soldiers. Many of the unmanned aerial systems were actually operated by Turks in the control centers, but not in the combat regions. The Azerbaijanis did the fighting. The Russians supported the Armenians, and they didn't help hardly at all. They didn't want to get into war with Turkey. The battle space is transparent because of all these systems, these layered systems that show everything. And it only is becoming more transparent as systems get better, as computers get better, as cameras get better, as we put more satellites up, as we put aerostats in the stratosphere. The stratosphere is crucial to command, and we have to think through that. Aircraft, all the way down to small UAS, to scouts on the ground, to robotic systems that can look on the ground. There are no sanctuaries. Everything now is transparent. How do you mass in order to attack in a transparent battle space? How will you do that? Our challenge is that warfare is changing dramatically. We cannot mass in the old way. We will never again be able to do Desert Storm, where we built up a big pile of iron, a big mountain of iron, and then said, okay, we're going to start the war on this day, and we attacked. We'll never be able to do that again because the enemy has learned that's how we fight, and that's what we'll want to do. And now you cannot build that iron mountain up, and it will be seen, and it can be targeted and hit. So we have to do that. For instance, we should train also for this. The National Training Center, we use the Desert Storm model primarily. We arrive, we make our iron mountain, and then we start a war. Think about this. We should train as we fight. They should get off the trains, immediately go to masked positions, hide, conduct operations distributed, and then start fighting. Wow, wouldn't that be hard? That's what we're going to be faced with in war. We should train as we fight. First strike advantage. This is crucial. We will not attack Russia and China 9 chances out of 10. But if they attack us, they have a first strike advantage. We could be at war tomorrow in Russia by mistake or design, and if they did it by design, their first strike, they would have learned from their first strike fiasco when they attacked Ukraine. When they attacked Ukraine, they hit Ukraine with a first strike that destroyed 2,111 different sites. That wasn't enough. It wasn't hard enough. It was a slap in the face. They wanted to slap their little cousins and say, hey, bring us bread and salt, we're coming. Welcome us. They misjudged it. From that false assumption, they went through horrendous problems, and then of course we saw the corruption of their forces and all sorts of other issues where the Russians have problems, which they're learning from and fixing. They learned the first strike has to be awesome, absolutely everything you got. So imagine Pearl Harbor was a first strike, but they didn't do the second and third waves. Imagine if they had. If the Chinese decide to attack us in the Pacific because we are in the way, if you're a Chinese planner, you have two choices. The Americans will get involved, or they won't get involved. We've already said we're going to get involved several times. Of course, we walked that back, but nonetheless, we don't know what we're going to do. We have achieved strategic ambiguity from ourselves and from them. They don't know what we're going to do. So they have got to figure out if we're going to get involved. And if we are going to be involved, even if it is just to support the Taiwanese with logistics and other things, then they will decide to do a first strike. And if they do the first strike, they know from what they saw in Ukraine, it has to be overwhelming. So if you're in Guam and your positions aren't hardened, why not? What are you waiting for? If you're in Hawaii and your positions aren't hardened, what are you waiting for? You go, they couldn't hit Hawaii. The Japanese hit Hawaii in World War II. They can hit wherever they want, and they can see it all. You can buy from Maxar Technologies and other commercial satellite companies unbelievable access to visions from satellites to the ground, let alone all of the military satellites that our enemies possess. So the first strike advantage is a tremendously difficult thing we need to plan for. And it needs to be in all our war games and all of our training exercises. If the enemy strikes us first, will we be ready? Will we survive? They could win in the first strike. The next is AI and the tempo of war. You've heard about AI today, and you'll hear about AI forever. Artificial narrow intelligence, artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence. We live in a world of artificial narrow intelligence. There is no AGI or ASI yet. We don't need artificial general intelligence to do many of the things that we need to do for our military. Artificial narrow intelligence is good enough. We need to understand it, and we need to know what it does to warfare. It speeds everything up. Everything now moves at a faster tempo. Imagine when, and we can do this today to a certain degree, and we're getting better at it every day, and so are the Chinese. When weapons are connected, like you saw, that Spike LR missile, and all other weapons are connected and enabled by AI. Imagine, if you would, a sort of sophisticated Excel spreadsheet. One column has all the targets that the systems are seeing from satellites on down and their location. The next one has all the systems. The next column has all the systems that are in range that can kill those targets. And the AI automatically tells you which ones does what, and all you have to do is say fire. And when that happens, all of those targets will be resourced with weapon systems that can destroy them, that are in range, and that will be hit. And if it happens simultaneously, imagine the battle shock that will occur. This is where we're headed. Now, no one can do this quite like I just explained yet. We can do it in small pieces, and we can do it for in some places. But it's going to happen more and more in the future, and we need to be ready for it. And the problem we have is that decision making now has to speed up. Everything, the tempo of war, is going so fast that things are moving a lot beyond human cognition. So we need AI to help us in the decision making area. The next is top attack. You saw what the Azerbaijanis did to the Armenians. We're talking Azerbaijan here. Most people don't know where Azerbaijan is. This isn't Russia or China. And Azerbaijan used some of the best systems they could buy from Israel and other places in Turkey. And they got these systems and they employed them expertly. They did such a good job that in 44 days the Armenians were totally at the end of their tether and sued for peace. Fully autonomous. More and more weapons will be going to full autonomy because the speed of operations is such that full autonomy will be needed. We like to say we'll never have fully autonomous vehicles or weapons because that would be unethical. Ethical discussions are very important and we need to have them. We also need to understand the truth. And the truth is that we do have fully autonomous weapons. Our doctrine does not say we won't have them. It just says we prefer to have weapons that are controlled by humans. But this is very similar to what happened in World War II. In World War II, prior to World War II, the United States said we will never, ever, absolutely not. We will not do this. We think it's heinous. We will never do unrestricted submarine warfare. Because unrestricted submarine warfare got us into World War I, and those darn Germans, they were just evil, and they killed those people on the Lusitania and other ships, and that's just bad. We will never have, ever, unrestricted submarine warfare. 3 hours after Pearl Harbor, the Chief of Naval Operations signed an order, unrestricted submarine warfare against the Empire of Japan. We got hit in the face with a sledgehammer. Next, super swarm. You'll hear a lot about swarming, and you'll hear a lot about small UAS and other UAS in swarms. Swarming is a tactic. Swarms are merely a group of things, whatever number you want to give it, that work together to try to overwhelm a defense. Swarming is not new. Custer was swarmed at the Little Bighorn. You don't want to be Custer. Swarming is bad. But it's bad when they swarm against you. But a super swarm is different, and it's very important for us to get our definitions down. All understanding starts with definition. A super swarm is an AI-enabled swarm. A super swarm will have the AI working all of the pieces. Imagine 100, 1,000 small UAS, for instance, with AI knowing what each one can do and sending the right one down to attack targets as the targets are identified by the targeting parameters. That super swarm is being worked on now. We can do this to a certain degree now. The Chinese are working on it now. Whenever you see a light show with small UAS, that's kind of an inkling of what can happen. Just imagine if all of those were a little smarter, connected to an AI that told them what targets to kill, and they came at you in that super swarm. Now, you want to start breaching enemy lines? You do the explosive breaching I talked about. and you have a super swarm following over A to B to C to D, killing all the electronic warfare, all the air defense systems, every other system that you can as you go through this. The kill web. All of you know what a kill chain is. We use kill chains in the military every day that we actually fight. Kill chain is human in the loop in most cases. A kill web is totally different, and we need to get our definitions down. A kill web is AI enabled. So the kill web is what I was talking about earlier with the simplified metaphor of the Excel spreadsheet. Imagine that kill web now where everything that you know that can hit is within range, that can be done, that can hit the target and destroy it, is then activated. That's a kill web. The next, we need to visualize in all domains. This is a huge problem. People are talking about common operational pictures. Most units don't have one. A common operational picture from platoon all the way to battalion would be ideal. A common operational picture from platoon all the way to corps would be fantastic. A common operational picture in all domains, an all-domain common operational picture, so you would know if space assets are available at the right level, that in fact cyber efforts are happening, and you know that they're having an effect. And the timing of all that is very important if you want to win in the modern age. We are still using paper maps in many cases to fight battles at the NTC. There's nothing wrong with an analog backup. We need better systems, and we need to ditch the screens. These screens are too big. They occupy too much space. We need to go to augmented reality goggles. We should have AR goggles like the HoloLens, or the stuff we put in the IVUS, which is the HoloLens, and we should use that for command and control. If we do, we can ditch the screens, and you can now have a command and control system that you could see holistically in 3 dimensions, and you'd be able to put up whatever information you needed. And then lastly, decision dominance. There's a lot of talk about decision dominance. What is it? Basically, it's the ability to decide faster than the enemy. So your OODA loop is so fast, your observe, your orient, your detect, and then your act loop is so fast that you're able to hit him multiple times before he even knows he's been hit. To get decision dominance, you need to understand all the other 8 of these disruptors and maximize them. Now, masking is one term that I want you to understand. It is crucial that we learn. Masking is what we need desperately on a transparent battle space. Camouflage is great, but that's only in the optical. Masking is holistic. Masking is not a military term. It is not in our dictionary of military terms. They have EW masking, but they don't have masking. This should be a principle of war. So you should take a picture of this, because this definition is important to every piece of equipment you make. Masking is the full spectrum, multi-domain effort to deceive enemy sensors and disrupt enemy targeting. Deceive their sensors so they have trouble seeing you, trouble locating you, and then disrupt their targeting system so that they have a hard time hitting you. Now, we talk about kill chains. I ask artillerymen all the time, what's the enemy's kill chain? The enemy you're up against, what is their kill chain? What are the steps in their kill chain? We don't know. We're inch deep on this. We should be much deeper. We should know their kill chain for their major weapon systems, their major artillery pieces, their major rocket systems, and then see if there's some ways that we can disrupt that kill chain. By understanding it, we have a better chance of disrupting it. And we have to be able to deceive their sensors. And those sensors are multifaceted, multi-domain, and we have to be able to deceive as many as possible. This is a picture taken at the National Training Center several years ago that shows you the electronic signature of the brigade at the NTC. The red area is the area that is of greatest transmission level. So that's where the radios and the computers and the digital information is going to the max. The yellow is the next level, and then green is the lower level. If you were the enemy commander and had this picture, which they will have, where would you place your fires? The red area would be wiped out. And of course, those are the command posts. So we have to be able to mask in 5 areas. And this is not an easy problem. We need to be able to mask in the optical, which comes down to camouflage. The U.S. Army is the best at camouflage in the world, right? Right? We suck. Why? Why? Why are we so bad at camouflage? 2 things: leadership, making it happen, and equipment. You guys can help with the equipment. Better equipment always helps. But even if you don't have the equipment, you can camouflage with all sorts of things. Our enemies do. The enemies that we fought over the last 20 years found out ways to hide from our sensors. We should learn from that. Optical, we have to be able to hide in the optical. Next, thermal. Every system that is made out there has a thermal signature that goes off the charts. How many of you, raise your hand in the defense industry, how many of you designed the vehicle with a minimal thermal signature as a major parameter? Right. We never had to worry about it before. We had the thermal sights, they didn't. But now everyone has thermal sights. So we have to have a different thinking about how vehicles are made in their thermal signature. Now, people will talk to you about signature management. Signature management is important, but it's probably the wrong way of looking at it. Masking is the way to look at it. Masking is holistic. Signature management gets you into individual pieces of equipment and starts talking about stuff like one piece of equipment that does this will be a little bit better. What's the goal of getting it? How much do you have to have it cooled, or how camouflage should it be? That's why masking is so important. The next is electronic. We have to figure out a way to diminish our electronic signature. You see this picture. This picture is available to everyone in the world. This kind of picture is available to almost everyone in the world if they just want to pay for it. The thermal signature, the electronic signature of those units, giving them away. We are an army that swims in a sea of electrons. Now, how many of you ever heard of Makivka? Very good. Makivka is in Crimea. This last New Year's, on New Year's Eve, about 350 or more recently mobilized Russian soldiers were in a building, and all of them were talking on their cell phones to home. And the Ukrainians were able to find that signature. They were able to locate the location of the building, and they killed everybody, almost everybody in that building. Now the Russians, that was the biggest loss of Russian soldiers in one day than so far in the war. And the Russian army, the generals got up and said, well, it wasn't our fault. We told the soldiers not to do that. They didn't do what we told them to do. That was their answer. You can go on YouTube and see it. It's pathetic. First of all, you don't give orders that you don't enforce. Who is enforcing the orders? Do we take cell phones to the field? Yes. Are we going to give our positions away? Yes. We've got to get serious about this. Next, acoustic. Some of the best sensors that you can get for the money are acoustic. They're passive in most cases. They listen for things like the crack of the guns, and then they can locate where those guns are, and if they're used in an unmanned aerial system or other systems. So we have to think about how we can lower our noise signature as well. When you were looking for a tactical operations center back in the old days, in the middle of the night when you were in blackout, and you couldn't find it, because they said they were at grid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but they were really at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, or whatever. You took off your helmet, you listened for the sound of the generators. And the sound of the generators gave the talk away. Well, unmanned aerial systems will hunt those talks at night, those generators at night, and will kill us. And lastly, quantum. Now, quantum you don't have to worry as much about right now, but it is an up-and-coming thing. The Chinese are working on quantum sensors to find our stealth aircraft, and they are able to do this to a certain degree in certain conditions. Quantum sensors in 10 to 15 years could become something much more dangerous for us. We need to focus on the top 4, but quantum is something you need to know about and understand. Now, What is the impact on future armored vehicle design with all the things that I just explained to you? First of all, you understand the triangle. We understand this triangle so well that it was the armor patch for most of our armored divisions. A triangular armored patch that basically said firepower, protection, and mobility. Those are the things that make up a good tank in the old days. But now we've got to think differently. We have to think outside the triangle. We've got to put all of those disruptors together to look at this in a way that approaches the problem differently. So, for instance, top attack. If we're going to defeat counter-UAS, we need a layered approach. Of course, we need an integrated air defense system, but it's more than air defense because these systems are very personal. They'll kill you dead. So we need to have a box full of drone bullets that shoot, much like Trophy might, or maybe on command, as a last-ditch defense, and then we need to work our way out. Now, the exact systems, I leave those to you, but what we need to do is think through the counter-UAS fight dramatically. You will not win a battle, you will not win a fight if you don't have a commander and you have resources. Who is in charge of the counter-UAS fight in the battle space at the battalion level? Who's responsible at the brigade level? Go ahead, somebody. Nope? Okay. Who's responsible at the division level? There's no commander in charge of this. We need to think through how we're going to fight this because this is a changing method of war. It's not just a fad. This is something that will never go away now. All these things need to be thought through. Visualizing the battle space. Why can't we see through our armor? Our tank commanders shouldn't have to put their heads up to look around. They should have augmented reality goggles that can look right through the armor because they're connected to cameras on the outside of the tank and they can see and move and operate. That ability alone gives you a tremendous advantage because situation awareness counts. All of these things, fully autonomous, top attack, AI, the tempo of war, all hinge on our ability to win the next fight. If we don't address these, we will be at risk. Now, you will never have a perfect system that can do everything. We shouldn't try to do that. Combined arms helps us to be able to take varied systems that have different capabilities and various risks that each system has, put them together in a way that make them all stronger. We need to think through combined arms differently. We need to make sure that we can train for this transparent battle space because everything that can be seen, everything that is out there can be seen, and everything that is seen will be killed. There are no sanctuaries. You are never out of range of the guns. They will hit us from the port on. They could even hit us in the U.S. Now, we would say that's not fair. Guess what? We know that's not fair. War isn't fair. And our enemies want to win. Now, if we want to deter war, we need to be the hardest nut to crack that has ever been made. They need to look at that and say, no matter what we do, it ain't going to work. And that's deterrence. Addressing these issues will help us get that deterrence. Lacking deterrence, they will help us win a war. We've got to think this through. Now, what are your questions?
Sir, you're talking about signature.
Go ahead, yes.
Extensive use by cell phones by the Ukrainians. Is that a TTP that we maybe need to consider in an urban environment?
Right. What's interesting is that during the initial phase of the war, excellent question, thank you. During the initial phase of the Russo-Ukrainian war, chaos reigned on both sides. The Russians were in their own little problems because they thought the war would be different. Immediately, the problems in the Russian communication systems came up. I've seen detailed pictures, all unclassified, of the insides of Russian radios. The chips that they had were fake. They used counterfeit chips. Somebody made a lot of money. So their radios didn't work very well. Many of the Russian commanders started to use the Ukrainian cell phone network, which was partially taken down, almost about 90%. But in some of the areas near the Donbass and other places, those cell networks were still working because they were closer to some of their allied forces. So the Russians were using cell phones and the Ukrainians were listening and knew exactly where they were. The Russians didn't expect the Ukrainians to fight. Now, we don't know if the Taiwanese will fight the way the Ukrainians fight. If they do, then China's going to have a tough time. If they don't, China won't. Now, the Russians never expected the Ukrainians to fight the way they did. So what happened was, in the initial chaos there, the Russian system wasn't working very well, and the Ukrainians and the Russians didn't have their EW out, and their ability to use some of their very sophisticated location equipment to find out where the cell phones were. And so in the initial phase, the cell phone network acted in Ukraine's favor. It was very much like basically everyone who saw a Russian tank would call it in. And there were too many people using cell phones to do that. However, the cell phone networks tapered off and began to be destroyed completely after about the first 10 days. Then Elon Musk brought in the Starlink system, and that gave the Ukrainians the ability to go again. Now, Starlink is interesting, and we need to study Starlink in depth because the Russians have found ways to locate the receivers. And when they locate the receivers, they can't jam Starlink very easily. You have to get basically in between the receiver and the satellite. Difficult to do. But when they can find the transmitter, well, they can blow up the transmitter and you're there with the transmitter. So that's a challenge, but it gives you a capability. Now, many of our units are using Starlink right now. I saw it being used at the National Training Center. I also was with the Marines at 29 Palms. I saw them using it. So Starlink gives us a great advantage. No other country in the world could put up a Starlink constellation of 4,000 satellites as fast as we did. You know, God bless Elon Musk. It's amazing. The challenge we have, though, is that we can't just rely on that one system. We've got to figure out how to communicate better. Our problem with cell phones is that we have, as a culture, nomophobia. You know what nomophobia is? Fear of not having your cell phone. No kidding. I mean, we're constantly multitasking, looking at our screens. Our challenge is that if we take these to the battle space, that cell phone says, "Here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you?" And that will give us away. Do we have the discipline to train without having our soldiers have cell phones? The answer right now is apparently not. We need to. The Russians have learned the hard way, and blaming it on the soldiers is lame. Just lame. They were brand new soldiers brought in. They didn't take their cell phones away. They told them not to use it. You know, so it was crazy. So Makivka, remember Makivka. Now, this battle space that we're in is deadly. It is transparent. You can be seen with all the things that we talked about. We've got to think through fighting. We've got to reimagine how we're going to fight. We have to do things differently, and we have to train differently. We have to train at home station and at the CTCs differently. We need to have unmanned aerial systems above us all the time. And we need to use the video and the film and the images from those unmanned aerial systems to get better at training. We need to be the best at camouflage in the world. We need to be absolutely the best at masking, which camouflage is a small part of, the optical area. So those things have to happen. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir, it did.
Thank you. Other questions? Sir, we're out of time? I hate when that happens. All right, look, it's a great honor to talk with all of you. You all are needed. We need your leadership. We need it desperately. We don't have a lot of time. No one knows when the next war is going to start, but we can't assume it's going to happen in 2030. We have got to be ready tomorrow. We need people to be thinking hard about this, and we need to change so many things. Now, we are a great nation with a great military that can do many things. We also have to suffer through some of the things I told you about here, like the first strike. And if they hit us hard in a first strike, we're going to be in trouble. We really need to think through this. Thank you very much for what you do. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.